they call the spoon theory.
Hmm.
And the spoon theory, a woman living with lupus was explaining to her best friend at a diner uh, what it was like managing chronic illness and being in a lot of pain every day. And so she took the cup of spoons that they have at a diner, next to the sugar and whatever. And she said, this is the energy that you have in a day, right? And so getting up and taking a shower, she takes a spoon away. Making myself breakfast takes another spoon. Blow drying my hair takes another spoon, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea that every activity, every action is going to remove a spoon from that jar. And so when the end of the day rolls around, or you're looking to the end of the day, you might only have two spoons left. And it's like, well, I could make dinner, or I could attend that lecture that I was looking to go to, or something's going to have to give, right? Because I will not be able to pull it all off. And so you're forced to make a decision about where you want to put, where you can and want to put your energy.
Were you too young to know you were a girl or a boy?
Oh, I hated the skin that I was in. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was unlovable. I couldn't leave my house without people staring at me or making rude remarks.
There is a sense, I think, or a message that many of us have received that it's okay to be a Jew as long as you're the right kind of Jew.
Just imagine what it would be like for you when you get out of prison after, 10 years in there for something you didn't do.
Approximately 6 or 7 policemen attacked me and put in my pocket a big quantity of drugs.
If we can choose how we live well, then do we not have the right to choose how we die well? And how do we do that with dignity?
There's never a moment where I am not in pain. It's exhausting. This bottom line is what it is.
I was born with a congenital indifference. My arm, I have my elbow, but it was like underdeveloped from here and out.
54% of those with disabilities are not working. If you're an employer, hire somebody with a disability. Don't regret it.
I've learned that us neurotypical people are the people who really need to learn from neurodiverse individuals. We are the aliens of this planet.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season will inspire you to empathize with people who are regularly marginalized and misunderstood. You won't want to miss a single episode, so hit the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. Welcome. Today on Purposeful Empathy, I'm joined by Kim Fuller, an award-winning social entrepreneur and leader in the nonprofit sector. Kim calls herself an incurable optimist. But as of 3 years ago, she's been living with chronic pain, an invisible disability that has totally rewritten her daily life in ways that we can't even imagine. In this conversation, we talk about how chronic illness can trigger all sorts of emotions, including grief and anger, why being believed is one of the most powerful forms of empathy, especially when you look fine, but you're really not. We explore being judged and how to pace yourself without shame, especially in professional contexts, and how chronic illness reshapes relationships, revealing who can really hold your truth. If you're looking for a heartfelt conversation that'll open your empathy floodgates, this show is for you.
So welcome to the show, Kim.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so delightful to have you. I mean, you're a personal friend. We go way, 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 way back. And it's nice to do a Zoom call because I've never seen this piece of art over your shoulder. So why don't we start with that? And please, for those who are just listening as a podcast, tell us what it's all about.
Right. So Gloria is named after that vivacious, bubbly, buxom hippo in the movie Madagascar, if you've ever seen it. And a good friend of mine painted this very colorful background, which in fact is only 2 feet by 2 feet. And the reason Gloria is larger than life behind me and now 5 feet by 5 feet is that during the pandemic, we were all working from home and I had to take over the living room. And I was on Zoom calls 8 hours a day. And apparently, my family found that I have a very big mouth and the sound was carrying throughout the house. And so my husband took a photograph of the original painting, blew it up on fabric, built up a frame, put soundproof backing in it, and put it behind me for my Zoom calls so that the sound would be absorbed. And that's how Gloria came to be literally like behind me on all my calls. And so when I moved into my office after the pandemic, I couldn't live without her. So now she hangs on the wall behind me and still, provides soundproof backing because I haven't gotten any quieter. So
it's a spectacular piece of art, certainly a conversation starter, but the colors are magnificent and Gloria has a lot of soul there. So, and she's
she
kind of
does. I like that she puts a smile on people's faces.
sweet. So listen, we've done your bio and all the work. I mean, I know you as a professional, I know you as a consummate volunteer, and such an important player in the Montreal's landscape around nonprofit. But what do you think might be something, before we get going into the depth of our conversation, what do you think people might find surprising to learn about you? Is there anything that you might want to share just to get to know you a little bit past the bio?
What would people want to know? I think people might be surprised to learn that, I I live with a disability, and I think that people have this perception of people who are in a leadership role and who have their stuff together, so to speak, or at least look like it on the outside. That we think everybody's life is just hunky dory, and it is, a very full life for sure. But I think that there's a lot of stuff that we live in our personal lives that don't show up elsewhere, and that's why I was really excited to be invited on your show, because it's important that we accept everybody for what they are. And I don't think in a professional landscape that we're too open about living with what we live with, whether it's a physical, visible disability or otherwise. And so it was hard for me to kind of come out to my peers and my colleagues and my clients that I am faced with certain challenges, because I wasn't sure how they would perceive me and if they would see me as anything less than capable of. And so I think that that's something that would surprise people, because they look at me and they say, oh, well, you look so healthy. How can you possibly be sick? And I think we need to be talking more about that.
And given the stat, I mean, if that's a true 1 out of 3 people nearly has a chronic pain problem, then you're speaking on behalf of millions of people who might be experiencing the same thing. So thank you, Kim, for making the time to do this. I really appreciate it. So I guess we'd have to go back in time. There was the before and then I don't know. You tell me. But what happened? What happened?
So about 3 years ago, I got really sick. It kind of creeped up on me over the course of a week, and I just started feeling worse and worse and worse. And I had a very important commitment for work. And I remember very clearly, because it was March 8th, that we had this commitment, and we had a whole film crew coming for to shoot a promotional video for my company. We had my whole team there. We made a day of it. And I was not feeling well leading up to it. And I thought, oh my God, I can't let everybody down. I can't rebook everybody. I've just got to push through and get through that day. And then I'll worry about my health afterwards. And so I did. And when I look back at the video today, I go, wow, I can't believe I was just hours away from being in the ER, but pulled it off. And sure enough, the next day I was at the hospital, just on the brink of passing out, because my blood pressure was incredibly low. And that is what started about a year's worth of investigating into what could be the cause of the health issue. I went through every specialist imaginable, specialist after specialist, guesswork after guesswork, tests after blood tests, and MRIs and CT scans, and you name it. All to come upon several diagnoses. So one being a heart condition, another one which was adrenal insufficiency, and more recently fibromyalgia. So fibromyalgia is about the one that most people have probably heard about when it comes to chronic pain. And then just very recently, I found out that I was misdiagnosed for the adrenal insufficiency. And so that's led to me basically starting almost from scratch again to get to the bottom of what is causing all of this. So, needless to say, disappointing after it's always disappointing to hear that you have a life-threatening illness, but at least it was one that I was learning to manage with medication and treatments and, support. And now back to kind of square one, still living with the pain and the issues, but not a diagnosis. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster, to say the least.
So does that mean all the medication that you were taking too, like
would have long term probably done me more harm than good.
wow.
It could have actually ended up giving me the disease that they thought they were treating me for. So again, gotta have gratitude for catching things at the right time, but then it's a little difficult to not be bitter about about having gone down the wrong path. But it is what it is, and I'm just trying to roll with the punches and try to find some answers. And so luckily I have a great medical team that's not giving up and still going to continue investigating. But yeah, so that's what it is. It's just always living with, setbacks, and you make a little progress here and then you might have a setback there. So it's something that you learn how to deal with chronic illness for sure.
Well, I'm sorry that you've had that setback and that you feel like you're starting from square one. I really do sincerely hope that they discover whatever the illness is or the condition is that can put you on the right path to sort of recovery, or at least sustainable good health for as long as possible. Wow. Okay, I did not know that. I wonder if you could speak to like when you might have realized that the pain that you were feeling, and maybe you could describe the pain a little bit too. When you made that transition in your mind that it was going to be sort of a long-term companion as opposed to something temporary, and what kind of brain fuck that might have been.
Well, it's torture not having a diagnosis because your brain just races. And of course, we all play Dr. Google and we all go online and try to self-diagnose, which is, I don't recommend because it's very scary. And then when you get a diagnosis, or in my case, if you get a misdiagnosis and you don't know it, there's when you're labeled chronic, then that is just it's well, in my case, it just floored me because I consider myself really capable. My LinkedIn title is that I'm an incurable optimist. You cannot get more positive. And I thought, whoa, this is really putting me to the test in terms of like what I can endure, how many times I can bounce back from things, and so on. And so when I was given the label of chronic illness, I went through the 7 stages of grief, and at first I was in disbelief, and then I was angry, and then I had a pity party, and I was like, why me? Why now? I was just turning 50. I was top of my game professionally. I had raised 2 really smart, capable young men who I was super proud of. I was in a happy place with my marriage. Like everything was going my way. and then this, and so you just get really bitter about, what did I do to deserve this kind of thing? And so, yeah, I went through all of the feelings of anger and disappointment, all of that. And then it settles, or at least in my case, I decided to tackle it like a project. So I was like, okay, what do I do when I'm faced with a new project? I do a lot of research. I try to understand the situation, the landscape, the ecosystem. Then I come up with a strategy. I come up with an action plan, and then I put the plan into place. And so I said, well, I'm just going to make myself the project. I'm going to learn as much as I can about chronic illness. I'm going to surround myself with support groups and, a great set of doctors and this and that and whatever. And that's how I coped, was I just treated it like I would treat any other project, with the way that I know how to do what I do well. And so that got me through. So the first year was just not knowing anything and not having answers. Then year two, I started having answers, but still not feeling better. And now I'm closing in on year three and still no answers, but with way more tools in my toolbox to manage living in chronic pain. So your earlier question was, what does it feel like? In my case, the best way to describe it is when you start feeling like you're coming down with the flu or a bug or a cold, you start getting a feeling of like almost like your skin hurts, and your joints are stiff, and you just have an overall body malaise that you just can't shake. Um, so that's basically my constant. I start the day feeling like that. I live the day throughout the day like that. And then it goes from bad to worse depending on how much I do in a day. If I overdo it, then I really pay for it in the evening. If I take it easier and I pace myself, then it's just a general like 6 out of 10 discomfort level as opposed to an 8 or 9 if I overdo it. But there's never a moment where I am not in pain. And it's been like that since March of 2023. So it's exhausting. This bottom line is what it is.
Okay, so I have like so many things that I want to follow up with. Since this is a way of us expanding our circle of empathy, having these conversations, I wonder if right in this, we'll stop here right now. There's more to cover, but let's talk about in the early days where you didn't know what was going on, but you're in pain all the time. What did you find useful to hear from partner, children, friends, family, colleagues, and what did you find not helpful?
Definitely the most helpful thing from my immediate family and coworkers, who were the ones who I couldn't hide from, um, was that they believed me,
Mhm.
that my doctor believed me. There are so many people living with chronic illness who get gaslit when they go to the doctors, who get people saying, well, you look fine, so I can't imagine that you're not feeling fine. We're used to attributing, physical markers like loss of weight or, skin color as a sign of not being well, but there are so many invisible illnesses out there. And so the first thing that I found really comforting was just the fact that I wasn't crazy, that I was going through this inexplicable experience, and that the closest people to me really believed that this is what I was going through. I mean, they could tell because I was not myself, and I'm a tough broad, but I was really struggling. And the panic and the anxiety that it creates when you don't know what's wrong and you're even questioning yourself, like, is it in my head or am I crazy? Like, is it even possible to be in this much discomfort all the time? It doesn't even seem real. So you start doubting yourself. So having people around me that that believed in me and believed that, what I was going through was real, was very helpful in that sense. What was unhelpful and what remains unhelpful is, and it's people mean really well when they do this. They want to kind of minimize and make it more dismissive in the sense of like, I'm sure you'll snap out of it, or I'm sure you'll bounce back, or you'll get over it or something like that. And they mean well, right? Because they don't want you to suffer, but at the same time, it is dismissive because it's not like I need to have some chicken soup and lie down for a few days and then I'll be better. I won't be better. And people who don't live with chronic illness can't understand the permanence of an illness like this. So it's yeah, I get a lot of people saying things that they mean well by, but when you hear it over and over and over again, it's a lot to take. So I've and then you try to in my case, and I've spoken to a lot of people who live with chronic illness, is that you end up downplaying things to protect other people's sensitivities and such, and my parents are getting on in age and they have their own challenges. I mean, they don't know half of what I've been through, because even like I'm a parent, and if I knew that my child was in that much pain all the time, I would be beside myself, right? So you tend to like mask certain things to protect certain people in your circles, right? And then, like I mentioned earlier, that professional perception of, like, well, can you still be running a business? Can you still be, taking good care of your clients? Can you still deliver on your job? And it's like, well, yeah, I can. I just might need a little extra time. Because if I have a bad day, I could be out for the day and I'll have to catch up tomorrow, But I think those things are tricky to navigate, is that I should say, I will be more considerate of how other people are going to respond to my answer. So you say, how are you? Most people say, I'm well, how are you? I take a really long pause before I answer that question now, because I need to figure out, okay, how close a friend are you that I can be honest with you? How much do you really want to hear about my miserable condition? And so, so you're constantly measuring a relationship so that you know how to answer something, because the truth would not go over well with everybody.
That's exhausting. That's emotional labor in addition to the physical pain. Okay. Again, another question that immediately comes to mind. You were talking about yourself as like this tough broad, which I know you to be, like, not tough broad as in like rah, 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 but just like a capable A type, that's really like just ready to take on the world. How have you, and maybe it's still a work in progress, given yourself self-empathy and self-compassion when you're sort of brought to your knees in pain, can't do your day, when you're used to the pace that you're used to going, and and can slam out a 10-hour day and just, feel good about it and wake up and do it all over again tomorrow? Like, how are you adjusting to your own limitations?
Yeah, so this is definitely a work in progress. I'll preface it by saying that I'm incredibly fortunate to have uh, an amazing healthcare team. So I was accepted into a pain clinic where I have a therapist, an occupational therapist, and a physiotherapist. And the three of them work as a team with me to try to improve my quality of life. So, from a mental health perspective, I work with my therapist now every 2 weeks. I see my physiotherapist every 2 weeks, and I alternate with the occupational therapist. And they are all working with me to help me learn how to be my new self. And that level of acceptance doesn't come very easily, because I was pretty used to the other person for 52 years. So this whole new, and so we refer to Kim and now Kim 2.0, and trying to like try to put a spin on it so that it's not so much what I'm missing, letting go of, don't have access to anymore, but what I can say no to now and what I don't have to do anymore because I can make better choices based on the have to prioritize my health. And I was recently talking with somebody and who's known me for a really long time and know that I run like a mile a minute, and they're like, wow, this must have been so debilitating for you to just be stopped dead in your tracks. And I said, yeah, but a lot of the stuff that I've had to let go of, like, I don't miss that much. And so when I said that out loud, it was the first time that I had actually like really had that thought in with so much clarity. And so it's taking, I have good days and bad days where I'll be like, I'm comfortable with where things are at, and then that old pattern starts creeping in, and I'll take less care of myself, or maybe I'll work too many hours, or maybe I'll overbook myself, or try to give too much and so on. But you slip, and you just have to acknowledge that, okay, you slipped and you didn't get your priorities, try to get them back tomorrow, and it is again another, it's more mental gymnastics because you're constantly trying to protect yourself and then forgive yourself when you haven't, taken good enough care of yourself. But yeah, it's just, you just got to keep learning from every experience, because what I did yesterday affects today. What I do today affects tomorrow. And so I'm constantly figuring out what I can do in a day based on yesterday's decisions and tomorrow's plans.
Which is a great segue to the next question. And of course, for everybody, it's different. So you're not speaking, on behalf of the monolith of people who have different situations. But how does chronic pain shape your day to day? Like if we walked in the life of Kim 2.0 on a decent day, on a so-so getting not so great day, and a really tough day, like what are we looking at in order for us to sort of really think about?
There's something they call the spoon theory. And the spoon theory, the best way I heard it explained was a woman living with lupus was explaining to her best friend at a diner what it was like managing chronic illness and being in a lot of pain every day. And so she took the cup of spoons that they have at a diner, next to the sugar and whatever. And she said, this is the energy that you have in a day, right? And so getting up and taking a shower, she takes a spoon away. Making myself breakfast, takes another spoon. Blow drying my hair, takes another spoon, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea that every activity, every action is going to remove a spoon from that jar. And so when the end of the day rolls around, or you're looking to the end of the day, you might only have 2 spoons left. And it's like, well, I could make dinner, or I could attend that lecture that I was looking to go to, or something's going to have to give, right? Because I will not be able to pull it all off. And so you're forced to make a decision about where you can and want to put your energy. And so for me, it starts the day before. It starts at bedtime the night before. That's usually when the anxiety creeps in. Am I going to get a good night's sleep? Because for me, in my condition, and many, many, many people living with fibromyalgia, if you do not get a good night's sleep, you're a mess the next day. You can have flare-ups, and it makes everything that much more unbearable. So there's a level of anxiety that comes the night before, because if you know that you have things that you have to do the next day, you want to be able to get up and do those things. And when you live with a chronic illness or any illness that could flare up unexpectedly, it starts the day before. So you hope to have a good night's sleep. You take measures to have a good night's sleep, and then your day starts the next day. And then it's, how is the day starting?
Mm.
Am I feeling sluggish? Am I feeling okay? Do I have a little bit of energy? Where's my pain this morning? Do I need to stretch a little? Can I do this? Am I feeling nauseous from it? Whatever, you have to kind of figure out. So I ease into the day and I will spend probably 20 to 30 minutes just sitting upright in bed. And that's the start of my day because I can't just spring out of bed anymore. If I do that, I will fall over. So I've learned to ease into it. And so I'll do some breathing techniques to kind of regulate things to minimize the anxiety because the minute the day starts, I start worrying about what I can't get done. It's just that it's my automatic go-to reaction is what if I can't do this? What if I let somebody down? What if I can't, deliver on what I promised? And that depletes your energy right there, right? So it's you've got to have mechanisms in place. So for me, thankfully, I've had a really long-standing practice of over 2 decades of yoga and meditation practice. So my breathing techniques and all of those things that I practice have come in so handy since I got sick because I go to them throughout the day to check in with myself and cope, basically. And then once the day gets started, I go in little spits and spats, and then I'm reminded, oh, I'm not who I used to be. I need rest. I need a break. I need a pause. And so I've had to reorganize my whole schedule to fit things in, to fit nothing in, essentially. Not putting meetings back to back to back, having a breather in between calls, being able to just go out and get some fresh air. Like these aren't nice to haves, they're must haves. So that's where working with an occupational therapist has been really great because one of the things that she does is help me work in those buffers and make it more manageable. Um, but yeah, it's a full-time job just coordinating all of that.
And on the really tough days when you are canceling things, or even after the 20 minutes and 30 minutes of catching your breath, calibrating in bed in the morning and realizing, nope, not going to happen today. What are those days like?
Oh, they suck.
Mm.
Because I pride myself on being able to, I do what I say and I say what I do, right? And so when I have to back out of a commitment or ask for a postponement or something like that, I feel like I'm letting other people down, but then I feel like I'm letting myself down as well because you know, I know what I'm capable of. But the thing is that that person isn't accessible anymore, right? And so it makes it all the more frustrating to know that this is the new situation when the memories of how I used to be able to do things are still so vivid. Um, if chronic illness had wiped my memory of the high functioning human that I used to be, I mean, it would probably be a blessing. But, you're just left with that kind of residual bitterness of not being able to cut it. So I just try to give myself grace on those days. I try to remember that even though I'm not doing everything that I had hoped to do, I'm still doing considerably a lot for somebody in my situation, and I just need to cut myself some slack. And that's easier said than done on some days. When I don't cut myself enough slack, then I have people around me who remind me and who will tell me what I need to hear when my self-talk is too negative. And so it's nice to have loved ones, friends, colleagues who will kind of like talk some sense into you when you need it. So you just have to be open to it because I know a lot of people who live with chronic illness really bottle a lot up. And when you do that, you're locking out support that could be available to you. So yeah, it's a question of being vulnerable enough to welcome it in.
Yeah, and that's a whole other learning curve to be on, is to give yourself permission to show vulnerability and accept support from others. On the tougher days, I wonder what you have found helpful from an empathic point of view. How have your family and friends shown empathy to you on those tough days, and which ways, for the general public listening, is not so helpful?
Um, the helpful stuff I would say is helping me recognize when I'm pushing too hard when I'm not recognizing it, right? I don't like being told that I can't do something, so I'll get pretty rough around the edges. So my husband's a very patient man, and I love him for it. Because I think I recognized now looking back on the last few years how I was like a wounded animal, and just being nasty at times because I was just so angry at what I was going through. And so when people are patient and they recognize that that anger is not directed at them, asking for help was so hard at the beginning. Not because asking for help was hard, accepting the help was hard. And accepting the help was hard for me because every time I had to ask for help, and it's every time I still have to ask for help, it's a reminder that I'm sick. I don't like being reminded that I'm sick, but I recognize that I need help with some things, right? And so it's not just a simple, oh, can you help, you know, take out the trash or something like that. It's, I ache all over. I can't take the garbage to the curve. I'm angry that I can't even take the garbage out to the curve. Like, and then it's not about, being angry at the person you're asking for help. It's just, it goes inward, right? And so you have to really be aware that you're reacting that way because it can really destroy relationships and your sense of self-worth if you don't kind of develop that level of awareness of how you're reacting to living with chronic pain or chronic illness. Things that are less helpful, I would say people who try to find parallels, or I know someone, or my cousin had this and tried that and whatever. Like the it doesn't always land really well, even though it's well intentioned. So I think that those things are frustrating. But for the most part, I've been very lucky that when I've had to change my schedule, people have been very understanding. And I've also gotten better at just warning people. You know, I've booked a lunch for next Tuesday with a colleague I haven't seen in several years. I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing you. I just need you to know that I've had some health issues of late and my days are unpredictable. So I may have to cancel on you at the last second. And if I do, it's not because I don't love you, it's just because that's how my days go. And I feel like when I open up and I share that from the get-go, then people are more understanding. And if they're not, then I don't need them in my life. So it's just.
You've opened up for me though, like an interesting thought. My sister, my only two sisters, at least that I know of, have a chronic condition as well, lupus. You've mentioned it before, and it's happened over the years, less so because I think they've kind of told me now. But I've probably slipped up once or twice where something will come across my feed that I think would be useful in terms of like some new research that's out or some whatever. I remember when I found out alfalfa was not something, a good food to eat for people with inflammation. Like I would share that along. And I got pushback, like as in like you're not living with it, and I'm constantly living with it. I'm thinking about it all the time. I know like what I've read, and I like staying on top of it. My doctors are staying like, leave me alone with this.
Yeah.
And fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's real. That's not just them. That's across.
No, I think that's for a lot of people living with it. Again, like there are some folks who, I just spent the last few days with a group of people who live with multiple chronic illnesses, and we were swapping, stories, and ailments and whatever. And I learned a lot from them. And we can all learn a lot from each other. But I think again, it's timing. It's yeah, it just comes down to if I if I say I'm struggling and looking for answers, then that's probably a good time to offer up, hey, I read this article about this and that, you know. But if nobody's really asking you for advice or have you tried this or that, then I probably wouldn't go to it. Just because, yeah, it's true. Like we are our own experts, and we spend a lot of time researching and looking things up and have doctors who are doing the same. So it can get a little much when folks are trying to be overly helpful.
Okay, let me ask another question that could be frustrating. There's, in the orbit of the world, books like Your Body Keeps the Score and other works by Gabor Mate talking about illness and how so many of our physical illnesses are rooted in psychological origins. I just wonder if you could speak to that sort of general frame.
Yeah. My first panic when I got really sick was, oh, did I cause this? And like, was I on the brink of burnout because I was, doing too much and whatever? And to have a doctor say like, no, this is actually something that has gone squirrely in your system. Like you didn't make this happen. That was such a relief for me because I thought, oh, I would be feeling really guilty if it had been otherwise. Um, is there a lot of talk about chronic illness and childhood traumas, chronic illness and other, links to, yes, but I mean, there's lots of books about lots of things. I don't know enough, and I haven't been looking at enough of the non-medical stuff, even though I do have a very holistic approach to wellness in terms of my meditation practice, and I do really believe that there is something that we can control more of with taking certain things into our own hands. Um, but then there's just other things that just suck, and it is what it is. So I'm trying not to like go too far down a rabbit hole of all these other things. Right now, what I'm trying to focus on is, are there things that I can control, like my diet, my sleep, my, lifestyle choices that could just put a few things in my favor? Because my body will tell me, this is not good for you, this is. So I'm trying to be really a good listener in the feedback that my own body is giving me. If you start looking into and reading all of it, you will just drive yourself completely crazy, going down all these rabbit holes, right? So I have a team of medical professionals who are doing the tests that need to be done, and we'll keep doing tests until we get some more answers. But they also said, you also really just need to be prepared that this is your new normal. And that even if we find a name for it or can put an actual diagnosis on it, it still won't change the fact that this is what you're living with. Like we can make it a little bit better. We can make it a bit more manageable. You can make those lifestyle changes, but this is it. And I think I've only had 2 weeks to have that kind of settle in. So I'm still quite in disbelief. Yeah. So I have to decide, where do I want to put my energy in terms of, do I want to spend the rest of my days trying to figure out what's wrong, how to make it better, or do I just want to make each day a little bit better so that I can have a better quality of life,
And I do want to talk about some of those strategies that have worked for you, but just before that, I don't know, I had the big feels when you were just sharing that for a minute. If you had a megaphone for a minute to educate the world about chronic pain, what would you want to share in this moment?
Probably that any of us who are living with it didn't choose it and would trade just about anything to get out of it. Um, there's 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 so much poison online and within certain circles of people who see people with disabilities and they're like, oh, they're just like, milking the system and they can be on, disability and get, and not have to earn a living and whatever. It's like, I would love to be working full time the way I used to. And there's so many people living with chronic illnesses and stuff who would want to be back doing the things that they were. Like, it's inconceivable to me that people would think that you would take advantage of a situation. Um, because I mean, nobody who's living with this sees it like that. Like, this is not an opportunity to not go to work, not be a productive member of society, and, get all the benefits of living with a disability. I mean, there are no benefits to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are none.
Heard you loud and clear there. So, what strategies, Kim, have you found helpful? You've mentioned a couple in terms of your morning routine and having breaks between meetings. You've talked about a meditation or yoga practice. What other things have you discovered that have been helpful or have heard of?
I think finding your allies within, your family members, your coworkers, your friends, finding those people who you don't have to pretend with, that you can just have a little bit of understanding and acceptance from is really important. And it sounds easy that, oh, we should all be empathetic or we should all be understanding of somebody else's situation. But some people have a really hard time coping with it, and if you think that you have this really close friend that you think you can be, open with and vulnerable with, you might find out that you can't because they can't handle seeing you suffer or they can't manage knowing that you're in this level of pain and stuff like that. And so it really changes the dynamic of relationships and stuff. And so I think just being vulnerable enough so you can kind of get a little sense of how people will be with your new self and that you don't always have to pretend to be your old self is a really great gift that you can give yourself if you're willing to accept that you may not have certain people as close to you as you might have in the past. But then you might discover new people. Like I have a whole bunch of new people in my life through support groups, through contacts that I've made, and they bring me a lot of comfort and support and information, and they can be really sanity saving when I'm having not so great days. So I think if you're keeping to yourself and you're keeping it bottled up and you're not seeking support from either support groups or, other people going through lived experience, like that has been the best thing, is to find my tribe, find the people who understand what it means to go through this every day. When you meet somebody who lives with what you live with, it's like meeting a unicorn, it's like it's really magical because you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel accepted, you feel good, that you're not, just losing your mind, right? And so I think there's a lot to be said for getting out there with whatever little energy you have and trying to create a new community of people who understand what you're going through and that you can learn from, because that's been really great for me. Doctors know some things, but they are never as educated as the patients themselves. And so I have so many hacks and tips and tricks that I've learned from people living with chronic illness that a doctor would never have been able to guide me through or prescribe something to me, you know? So I think that's been the number one thing is, and that's why I volunteer for the organization that I do, is because I turned to them in a moment of need. And then I realized how valuable that support group was. And so now I help lead support groups and I help, give back to that organization and to that larger community. And so through my involvement, I get a lot out of it, just as much as I put into it, which I find really, really rewarding.
So we'll include information about what's the name of the organization?
There's a few.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're going to get those
I'll
from
give them to you in the notes. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put them in the show notes. And also, maybe this is just a moment if you've got any hacks, any strategies that have worked for you managing chronic pain, maybe we include those in the comments as well. People can benefit from that. So I have a couple of last questions, Kim. And if there's anything at any point, like before we say goodbye, where you feel like we haven't covered it and you want to touch on it, feel free to just say, oh, I want to add one more thing. What do you think workplaces? Yeah, how could they what do you wish workplaces could do differently, or how they behave differently to understand or manage people with chronic pain in their midst?
Yeah, so in my case, I run the business. So that was a challenge in and of itself, is how do I model leadership when I'm the one that is in need, right? And so again, with just honesty and transparency was how I navigated it. I think in the same way that we have breastfeeding policies and bereavement day policies and all of these things, workplaces should think about what it means to have somebody on their team who's living with a disability of any kind, and what kind of accommodations can be made so that that person can do their best work, but also go home and at the end of the day and be their best self for their family members and for themselves. And not leave it all at work because you're so afraid of losing your job if you didn't overperform that day. So I think open discussion about, what that means. I think a lot of people live in isolation when they're going through something like this and live with chronic illness. It's very isolating because people don't want to talk about it, or but how do you talk about it in a way where it's not like, oh, okay, folks, today Kim is going to come and talk to us and give us a show and tell about what it's like to live with chronic illness, and let's all be extra nice to Kim, like that's not the point, but it's where do we, raise the level of awareness so that we can be a bit more empathetic. But I would say we need to do that
Anyway,
regardless
yeah.
of who's living with whatever, because we've all got something we're dealing with, right? So, we would always have a check-in at the beginning of every workday. And some days somebody on my team, their toddler was throwing a fit before they got them on, off to daycare that day, and they were starting their day with just a little less patience than most. Well, that's not the time to say, yeah, Julie, are you going to have that report on my desk by 10 a.m.? Like Julie had a bad start to her day. So let's just cut her a little bit of slack. Or maybe even say, hey, I know you had that report due for 10 o'clock today, but if you want to get it in by end of day or even tomorrow's fine. Can we think that way? Can we have that automatic reaction, regardless of whether that person's living with a difficult situation or not? I think that's just kindness, that we have to develop in the workplace. So it's always understanding where people are coming from. And if you have somebody who has certain needs, see how you can accommodate to the best of your ability and just be a good listener, and see what's possible. I think that's already a huge step.
Yeah, humanizing the workplace. I'm all in favor of that. Absolutely. So we're at the end of our interview, and I always have a final question for my guests. And again, if you have anything to add before we say goodbye, feel free to jump in there. But the last question is, if you can think of a moment, not a generalized statement, but a specific memory when you were on the receiving end of empathy. It could be under the circumstances of the last few years. It could be long before that, whatever comes to mind. So on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
Can I use an adjacent example?
Yeah, sure.
Which I think is equally interesting. The focus has been on my situation for so many years now. My husband was talking to his best friend, and he said, "How are you?" And he just lost it. Like it hadn't even occurred to him as a caregiver to think about his own situation, because we were so wrapped up in my illness and diagnosis and adapting to new lifestyles and whatnot. Gotta watch out for the caregivers in our lives, because they're going through a lot. And so checking in on the people who are caring for others, I think, is really important. And that moment of empathy gets me a little choked up, because yeah, even like I've now become more aware that I need to check in on my husband, on my kids, on the people who are, supporting me through my difficult days, to see how they're coping as well. So empathy for, yes, the people who are going through the stuff, but then there's this whole support network around that person, and we need to check in with them as well.
Love that, and so on brand with who you are to make your purposeful empathy story about someone else. I love that. I love that. You have done such a huge service to anybody who's watching or listening, just to feel like they've been heard and seen. And for those who are in relationship or in friendship or in collegial, whatever, just for us to have a better understanding of what that's about, and for us to show up with a little bit more empathy. So thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for asking these questions and getting these messages out there. And I hope that more people will spread the word and just learn to lead with a little bit more empathy and understanding, and it'll make a big difference.
Let's end on those final words. So thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
If you know someone who would benefit from this episode, please share it with them now. Post the link to your socials, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The world needs more empathy, and you have an important role to play.